Two Moons by Sharon Creech. Chapter 3. Bravery. Because I first saw Phoebe on the day my father and I moved to Euclid, I began my story of Phoebe with the visit to the red-headed Margaret Cadavers, where I also met Mrs. Partridge, her elderly mother. Margaret nearly fell over herself being nice to me. "What lovely hair," she said, and "Aren't you sweet?" I was not sweet that day. I was being particularly ornery. I wouldn't sit down and I wouldn't look at Margaret. As we were leaving, I overheard Margaret whisper to my father, "John, have you told her yet how we met?" My father looked exceedingly uncomfortable. "No," he said. "I tried, but she doesn't want to know." Now that was the truth, absolutely. Who cares? I thought. Who cares how he met Margaret Cadaver? I was standing on the porch, and I saw Phoebe's face again at the window next door. At the time, all I could think of was getting to our new house, which I hoped would be miles and miles away out in the green countryside. When at last we left Mrs. Cadaver and Mrs. Partridge, we drove for approximately 3 minutes. 2 blocks from Margaret Cadaver's was the place where my father and I were now going to live. If someone had blindfolded me and spun me around a few times and driven me around for an hour and then removed my blindfold, I would have thought I was still in front of Margaret's house. Tiny squirt trees, little bird houses in a row, and one of those bird houses was ours. No swimming hole, no barn, no cows, no chickens, no pigs. Instead, a little white house with a miniature patch of green grass in front of it. It wasn't enough to keep a cow alive for 5 minutes. "Let's take a tour," my father said rather heartily. We walked through the tiny living room into the miniature kitchen and upstairs into my father's pint-sized bedroom and on into my pocket-sized bedroom and into the wee bathroom. I looked out the upstairs window down into the backyard. Half of the tiny yard was a cement patio and the other half was another patch of grass, which our imaginary cow would devour in 2 bites. There was a tall wooden fence all around it, and to the left and right were other, identical fenced plots. We sat on the front steps and waited for the moving van. When it arrived, we watched the men cram our Bybank's furniture into our birdhouse. After they finished, my dad an inch into the living room, crawling our sofas and chairs and tables and boxes, boxes, boxes. My father said. It looks as if we tried to squeeze all the animals into the chicken coop. 3 days later, I started school, and that's when I saw Phoebe again. She was in my class. The students in my new school spoke in quick, sharp bursts and dressed in stiff new clothes. The girls all wore their hair in exactly the same way, in a shoulder-length bob. That's what they called it, with a long fringe, which they repeatedly shook out of their eyes. We once had a horse who did that. Everybody kept touching my hair. "Don't you ever cut it?" they said. "Can you sit on it? How do you wash it? Is it naturally black like that? Do you use conditioner?" I couldn't tell if they liked my hair or if they thought I looked like a wang doodle. They all seemed to talk quite a lot, and everyone seemed to have braces on their teeth. One girl, Mary Lou Finney, said the most peculiar things, like out of the blue she would say, "omnipotent" or "beef brain." I couldn't make any sense of it. There were Japanese twins, a brother and sister, who didn't speak at all except to say yes, yes, and yes, yes. There were Megan and Christy, who jumped up and down like parched peas, Moody Beth Ann, and pink-cheeked Alex. There were Ben, who drew cartoons all day long, and the most peculiar teacher named Mr. Berkway. And then there was Phoebe Winterbottom. Ben called to a freebie ice bottom and drew a picture of a bumblebee with an ice cube on its bottom. Phoebe tore it up. Phoebe was a quiet girl. She stayed mostly by herself and seemed quite shy. She had the most pleasant face and huge, enormous sky blue eyes. Around this pleasant round face, her hair curled in short ringlets as yellow as a crow's foot. During that first week, when my father and I were at Margaret's, we ate dinner there 3 times the first week. I saw Phoebe's face twice more at her window in the house next door. Once I waved at Phoebe, but she didn't seem to notice. And at school, she never mentioned that she had seen me. Then, one day, at lunch, she slid into the seat next to me and said, "Sal, you're ever so courageous. You're ever so brave." To tell you the truth, I was surprised. You could have knocked me over with a chicken feather. Me? I'm not brave, I said. You are. You're ever so brave. I was not. Salamanca Tree Hiddle, was afraid of lots and lots of things. For example, I was terrified of car accidents, death, cancer, brain tumors, nuclear war, pregnant women, loud noises, strict teachers, elevators, and scads of other things. But I was not afraid of spiders, snakes, and wasps. Phoebe and nearly everyone else in my new class did not have much fondness for these creatures. On the first day of class, when a dignified black spider was investigating my desk, I cupped my hands around it, carried it to the open window, and set it outside on the ledge. Mary Lou Finney said, "Alpha and Omega, will you look at that?" Beth Ann was as white as milk. All around the room, people were acting as if I had single handedly taken on a fire breathing dragon. During that next week, if an innocent spider was crawling towards someone's desk, they would all yell, "Sal, get it!" When a wasp flew in the window for a peek around the room, they said, "Sal, it's a wasp, get it." And once a tiny green garden snake slithered along the baseboard, and everyone screamed, "Sal, a snake! Oh, Sal, get it!" As I was trying my best to assist these various creatures in finding their way out of our classroom and back into the wide open spaces, people would say, "Sal, kill it, kill it." I wonder how they would like it if someone smushed them just because they happened to stray into someone else's room. I suppose that just because I was not afraid of these little creatures, people thought I was brave. I suppose they didn't know how I felt about cars, cancer, nuclear war, and all those other things. What I have since realized is that if people expect you to be brave, sometimes you pretend that you are, even when you are frightened down to your very bones. But this was later, during the whole thing with Phoebe's lunatic, that I realized this. At this point in my story, Graham interrupted me to say, "Why, Salamanca, of course you're brave. All the Hiddles are brave. It's a family trait. Look at your daddy, your mama." "My mom is not a real Hiddle," I said. "She practically is," Graham said. "You can't be married to a Hiddle that long and not become a Hiddle. That is not what my mother used to say. She would tell my father, 'You Hiddles are a mystery to me. I'll never be a true Hiddle.' She did not say this proudly. She said it as if she were thumpingly sorry about it, as if it was some sort of failing in her, some sort of loss. My mother's parents, my other set of grandparents, are Pickfords, and they are as unlike my grandparents' Hiddle as a donkey is unlike a pickle. Grandmother and grandfather Pickard stand straight up, as if sturdy steel poles run down their backs. They wear starched iron clothing, and when they are shocked or surprised, which is often, they say, "Really? Is that so?" And their eyes open widely, and their mouths turn down at the corners. Once I asked my mother why grandmother and grandfather Pickford never laughed. My mother said, they're just so busy being respectable. It takes a lot of concentration to be that respectable. And then mother laughed and laughed in a friendly, gentle way. And her own spine was not made of steel. You could tell because she bent in half, laughing and laughing. My mother said that grandmother Pickford's one single act of defiance in her life as a Pickford was in naming my mother. Grandfather Pickford, whose own name was Gayfeather, named my mother Chanhassen. It's an Indian name meaning tree sweet juice, or in other words, maple sugar. Only Grandmother Pickford ever called my mother by her Indian name, though. Everyone else called my mother Sugar. Most of the time, my mother seemed nothing like her parents at all, and it was hard for me to imagine that she had come from them. Only occasionally, very, very rarely, in small, unexpected moments, the corners of my mother's mouth would turn down and she'd say, really? Is that so? And she sounded exactly like a Pickford.